Hi everyone, and welcome to DevToberfest. What day is it today? It's Tuesday, tooling and front end. And we have Marian and Nicolas here talking about the Mockserver, the Fewer Elements Mockserver. So without further ado, I hand it over to them. Enjoy, have fun. Feel free to put any questions in the chat.
Nicolas, you want to start sharing? Yeah, perfect.
Exactly. Sorry, I was also on mute again. So welcome, and let's start with tiny presentation to explain to what we are talking about today, which is the Mockserver. The first thing is why you should care. Well, I guess if you're watching this, you care a little bit, or you are just curious and so something that made sense, maybe not. So why you should care about a Mockserver? The first thing is, why is it important? A Mockserver is important for you because usually it allows you to do parallel development. So even if the backend isn't ready, or if you want to test out something, you can have a mock version of your service and your data where you can tweak things, try things out, and explain to all those backend people what they should do. The second thing, very important, isolated testing and testing in general. Through a Mockserver, you can ensure that you have reproducible tests, simpler pipeline, so you don't need to spool up a full CAP service, or you don't need to try and connect to something already deployed. And this allows you to test things, create repeatable tests to ensure that your functionality, your application is still working out throughout version upgrades, throughout changes being done left and right on your stuff. Then offline development, well, it's a tiny thing, but if you somehow happen to be in a situation where you have no internet connectivity, which is unlikely these days, okay, you still can develop while having your Mockserver there. Why is it important as well? In a Mockserver, you get realistic dataset, or rather, you can come up with realistic dataset if you want it. Very often, I've seen in the past in projects that people have in their actual backend systems that they're using to develop just tiny scramble of data that vaguely makes sense or made sense to the people who created them at one point in time. And at least with mock data nowadays, you have a lot of generators, you have AI that can help, and you can create easily a really large amount of data, which would be realistic and which would really help you in your application to test things out. Or test out stupid things like, does your application behave correctly if you only use emojis as a product name? And the last one for why is it important is that you are also independent from your main backend. So it's kind of the same as the first one, but just to reiterate, but more from the backend perspective, because you get reduced load on your actual backend. So if you have to pay for it, and to probably all do, that implies that you will have less cost there, and you will most likely also have less data pollution. So it's not like you will have test 1, test 2, test 3, test 4, because everything can be done from the local side. So that's the aspect of why the Mockserver is important. The second thing is to talk about what are the key features that then mine is going to take a bit of time to go into with more details. The first one is that the Mockserver supports OData v2 and v4, and this includes the draft pipeline. So the draft choreography is fully supported in Mockserver. You don't have to care about it, it just is there. Then the Mockserver itself has a very low entry cost. So you don't have to spend hours defining a set of data and database and blah, 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 and everything. You can start with just one metadata file, and you get something which is up and running and where you can already start creating data and accessing something. And you get some vaguely well-generated mock data. But once you get past that entry cost, you can also go ahead and have full customization of all your data, all your processes. You can implement custom actions, make them fail, make them delay, whatever you want is available at your fingertips. What we do also support out of the box is multi-tenancy. You might wonder why it makes sense for Mockserver. Multi-tenancy is a way for you to have different data sets available at any point in time without them corrupting each other when you are when you're running your test. So you can have one data set with a very, very large amount of data, another one which is going to have only a few, and that's all available and all customizable. Or you can say, in this specific tenant, all actions will fail, or all actions will be slower, etc., etc. Then what we do have is that it's a middleware. So that's more a remark compared to what people might know from the past and from the UI5 Mockserver, which was running in the browser, which was running in your main thread. This Mockserver exists as a UI5 tooling middleware. It can also be used just as a generic middleware, but the most use cases are going to be through that. And as a middleware, that means that you do have requests in the network that you can see, and that whatever you're doing from the middleware side can also be debugged independently from the application that is currently running. It also means that if you reload the page, the mock data is still there, which is a rather novel approach compared to what existed in the past. And finally, we also have multi-service support, meaning that the Mockserver can now instantiate multiple services, write all of them within the same thread, and that you can expose, well, your main data, your value help services, or just different services that are going to be running side by side. Okay, now I've talked alone enough, so now it's your turn, Marian, and to show us a bit of what we can do in practice.
Yeah, let's just share my screen. I really want to try to show more or less everything what Nicolas just showed us, what features are, what is possible. And for this feature and for you in the future, we created this Mockserver tutorial. So basically, I'll go along each exercise and each steps and show you how you can use the Mockserver and in which circumstances, in which use cases you can use it and how. So I have a really long README with a lot of exercises. We go through each of them. So one of them is this middleware Mockserver in practice. So that's our tutorial, and we go here step by step through all the steps. So first, setup. How is it set up and what we're going to use? There's a prerequisite and setup step here. So you can clone and run it yourself, or you can start from scratch, but you need some kind of cap backend. So I have a repo which is for a different purposes from showing what all the actions and functions can do in UI5, but it's a good basic cap service I can reuse here. So that's what I'm going to do here. And first step is basic setup, but I want to show you how you can really easily start from scratch. Just what Nicolas said, just without any setup, giving you the possibility to mock your data. So just start the cap server first. And then I use the Fury Tools generator. And with the Fury Tools generator, we get automatically the mock configuration, and you can use it easily. So I'm going to use the terminal because it's just quicker to use. I'm going to go for the list report, and then here is is it already running? Yeah, it's already running. We use the bookshop service entry point, books, and we use chapters as well, and everything else is just default. Yeah. So it's already created. Project 1 is the default name. And with the just generated app, you see a YAML file called UI5 mock YAML. And in there, we have the FE Mockserver already configured. And it's the URL path, so that's the path from the CAP OData servers. And then we have the metadata path and the mock data path, and with the option generate mock data true. So in this configuration, it is here at local service. That's the metadata pulled from the CAP servers. And based on that CAP service, the mock server can already generate all the data from it. So if we start the app now, it will use the metadata and generate just really simple, basic sample data. Oh, wait. One thing. Let's remove that here. So it actually uses that mock data. Still the live data? Oh, yeah. Yeah. I want to start the mock server. So that's just a normal one. I want to start the mock, not the normal one. There we go. So now you see it's creating based on the metadata, just simple, like it's have the title. So basically that's the property name and just adding one and so forth. You can still edit the data. So you can just add something here and it's saved. You can see it here. You can even use the actions defined from the CAT backend. Just in that case, it doesn't do anything because that's going to be in a later step. We have to implement those actions for us. So for the next steps, I'll use the exercise project here. So basically exercise 1, we already did it, but still it's explained if you maybe have generated your app without the initial mock server setup. So that's just a basic configuration you can use, and just some important points. For example, if you still have the backend configuration from the Fiori proxy in there, it may can still get the data from the backend. So usually I remove this just to make sure I really get the offline or the mock data I really want. And then if you just clone it, you can start it and explore what you did. Then the next point, usually those custom data is mainly useful if you don't have any other data and just want to see how the app works, but usually you want to have some realistic data. So that's why you can, of course, define custom data from JSON files. And in that case, it's similar to the CAP procedure. You have to not configure anything here. You just have to name the JSON files like the entity in the metadata. So if you haven't, you can create the data folder from the main service, create some book.json data here. And as you can see here, you can also control the end draft state here. And then in the last step, generate mock data false, because we actually want to use the JSON data. So if you look at the data here we have already some data from the created. So here's books, chapters, currency. So and if you look at the metadata, it's the same here. Entity type books, reviews, and so on. And in the mock data, it's false. So let's just start this app. Now we can actually see the data we defined here. Plus what I did here is I turned watch true on. maybe you don't always want to have that because every time something changes, the server starts. So maybe you want to keep the state, but in my case, I want to just showcase how it works. So I always have the watch true on. And now when you just change something here in the data, you can see here something changed and the app already reloaded on itself. And you see here the data. So next step, JavaScript logic. Because we live in the JavaScript Node.js world, obviously we can use JavaScript, and with JavaScript we can do whatever we want with it. But we have some APIs, a method available to interact with the mock server. What I'm going to show is get initial data set, where just the initial data it's not coming from JSON but from JavaScript. And we can use execute action because we want to implement something similar to the backend logic. So we can actually mock that logic here as well. So we don't have to do anything in the YAML, but we can create a new file. Same logic for the JSON files. It's the same name as the entity. So in that case, book.js. And in that, when the book entity is called, get initial data set is called, and then it creates here in that case the sample data based on the JavaScript. So it's pretty simple. You return an array of objects. Here's the book object, and I just create some random ones with authors and genres and stuff. And then execute action. Also have a method here, and it will be one method for all the actions. So you get the action name here, and then I just use the switch. Depending on the action, something is happening. So I have two actions here, set discount and promote book. And those will be called when I press them in the Fury Elements app. So just start this app then. And you see here that's the generated data we have here. It's also added some numbers in the end. And when I set a discount for this science fiction book 1, just say 10%, and just reload, it actually works. Again, it's in this session, so if I would reload this session, it get refreshed as well, especially here because I use some random parameters. It's not the same, so if you rely on the same data every time, it's probably maybe better to use JSON for that. So, and now when I look here in the data, here's book.js, you're probably saying, okay, maybe I need to have a look how it actually works. I'm starting out with it. So you can, of course, also just debug those steps. Just create in the backend and not in the VS Code, a debug terminal. So I want to debug our third exercise. And now he's starting in debug mode. And let's say we need a breakpoint first. Let's say breakpoint at discount. So same thing here, 10% test. And now we're in VS Code and using the breakpoint. And now we can have a look at all the parameters from here. So for example, action definition. You get all the full name, you get the name, you get the parameters in here, and return type. Action data is that what I actually put in now in the pop-up. So we have the percentage and the reason, and keys, because it's a bound action. I get the keys from the entity. I used it here. So ID and is active entity. So those are the keys in that instance. And we have some other APIs available. So this base, you can see here, there are quite a few APIs available to use, for example, fetch entries, because I want to get the entry from all the data we have available, and I use just the keys as a parameter, and then I get this entity I want to change the price on. And now I can just go here, it will change the price 10% less. And then we have the update entry, and with that I can use the key as a first parameter and the second parameter, the update variable, and then that will be updated, and then can just return message, reason, price, whatever is necessary here.
Just a small remark on that. So all of this is something that you can do if you have specific needs, if you have specific logic that you want to see. It's nothing that is, I would say, mandatory, but it's really a way for you to go ahead and add a few additional logic to maybe go also into all those edge cases that you might have in your real implementation.
And I think especially with Gen AI, if you want to mock something from CUP, it's, I think, really easy because you just can say, okay, that's my backend code from CUP. Please set that, use that in the mock server. So to mock it, if it's not that complicated, it's pretty easy. If you look at ABAP code and going into Barbies and something like that, it's maybe a little bit difficult. But I think Gen AI can help a little bit here. All right, now we have our custom code. Next step is multiple services, because usually you have one or more services you're using in your app, especially if you go in Freestyle app, you use way more services. As an example, I have here 2 services, the bookshop service I used so far, and I created another service, the review service. Here. So it's just really simple, giving you some reviews back, and it's related to books as well. Just sample to show there's another service available and used here in this app. So for that, we have to create a new folder. So we create here the review service and the review service including the data. And for the metadata, you can use just here, if you run the CUP server, you can just go to the metadata and you have the metadata available and just save it to the folder. And then same as the others, look for the entity name and use the entity name for the JSON files. And we can add some data here for the reviews and from the books. And in the YAML file, you just add another service. Same setup as before, just metadata path, where's the metadata, where's the mock data. You can define an alias. We are going to use that in the next exercise. And because we have JSON data, we don't need to generate the mock data. Okay, that. So we can see here in our local service folder are two service folders, both have data in their books and reviews. Because I didn't implement any custom code to actually get the data, you don't see anything here. But if we go to this URL, so there it is there. So that's the port where the app is running, basically the middleware, the mock server, and where here can you fetch the books from the review service or the reviews from the review service. So it works. So next step is when you have 2 services, they sometimes talk to each other or exchange something in the backend. So sometimes something happening in the one service and it updates in the other service. So especially if you use actions and something like that, you need to update the data in the other service from one service. So for that, we can have here the sample from promote book. So I will create, or I will have the action promote book, which updates the book in the description and in the stock. And in the same time, it will add a review. So for that, I have this API get interface. We created the alias. So that's the alias for getting the service. And in that service, I want to get the review entity. And that with that entity, I can use add entry and add a new entry for the review service. So let's try it out. Starting the 5th exercise. And get the reviews. So we have currently, so that's basically our other service with 3 reviews, and we promote a book. There's no pop-up here or anything, but we can have a look here, and it should be, yeah, here's the new entry in there. That's the new entry, so that's basically added by our action, and here, yeah, that's promoted, so the description was updated as well. So now you have the ability to even better mock what is actually going in the backend, especially if you internet connecting services. They update each other or create entries from each other. So next one is tenant isolation, and I think that's a pretty important feature you can use here, because usually, you know, if you use a service, you have the sub-client there in the URL, and you're working on your client. In that case, it works similar because you have some data you can reuse for different processes. So for example, if you have a book JSON and you have 2 different kind of process you want to test, you would have to change the data in the book JSON all the time. So in that case, we can use this tenant or context-based isolation to have different data if you use different sub-client IDs. So in our sample, we have tenant 001 and tenant 002. And now, the same as before, we don't have to configure where it gets the data from, with which client, but we just have to use the entity name. So in our case, it's books, and add the tenant name with a dot after that. So tenant is just a name, so you can add slash, I don't know, process 1 or Jira ticket or whatever, just make clear that's the data for that process. So we have 001, 002 data in here. So now when we start, let's look at the app. So here, that's our data. So we only have tenant data for books in that case. So that's one entry here, another entry here, and we also have a generic one without any tenant as a name in there. Oh, that's the wrong one. So 6. So now that's just the default one because we don't have any subclient in there. But if I change the subclient, for example, to 001, we have just tenant 1 in here. So, and then 2, we get a 2. And here you can see we are tenant 002, but we still see the chapters. And that's a nice other features that if you have specific data for books, you don't need to define that for chapters again. So the logic is, okay, I'm on tenant 1. Is there tenant 1 data? If not, go to the default data. In that case, that's happening for chapters. There is no specific data for tenant 001. So it's just using the default chapters data in here. And we also can have specific logic import tenant data in our JavaScript code. So just start again as a debug. Now, debug mode, we can set a breakpoint in promote book. Let's promote that one. And now we can have a look. We have a tenant ID that is coming from the OData request. So here, tenant ID, and that's the default one because I didn't specify any tenant. So it's just tenant minus default. And if I specified any, it's tenant 001. So let's add a client in here and promote it again. And here we have tenant minus 002. And now it's a different promote message in here, marketing book promoter with campaign boost. And we have it here, tenant 02. So now you can even have more specific logic for different use cases and with different data. So it's really powerful if you have something really specific error that only happens with really specific data, and the backend logic is also different because you're in a different state of the backend. Now you can just change it here as well and have a look what happens. So going back to the exercise. So here's the different logic you can use, and you just have to add subclient and the name. And again, you can use any name for that.
Yeah, and just to mention, because there was also for a long time a maybe rather confusing parameter on the configuration of the Mockserver called context-based isolation. Actually, the feature with the SAP client and getting one tenant or the other is just enabled out of the box. So the context-based isolation is something probably nobody cares about, where you can also refer to the services by prefixing the path with tenant dash the tenant name. But in most of the common scenario, just using subclient is a much more natural approach that you can use. And that is just enabled by default.
Yeah, you can see here my YAML file. I just added debug true, probably debugged here something. And again, watch true is also everywhere. So even if you change something here in the logic, it's reloaded, and then you can just try again. So if you want to really just, okay, it doesn't work, I want to try out, you can use watch true. Or if you want to use, okay, that specific state or time, just watch true false. And if it's watch true false, yeah, watch false. And if watch false, you just can kill the server and start again to reload the state you want.
Yeah, that's also the thing. The Mockserver, yeah, the watch just reloads behind the scene the data that you're changing. So you could also change one service without changing the other. That should be supported, I think. And yeah, it's not like fully, you could still be in your application, you just try to execute an action, didn't work, and you can just change the implementation in the backend and retry again, and that would
yeah,
be...
you can just use that, yeah. And I want to just restart when I change something in here, yeah. All right, then next step is the error handling. Obviously, something can happen in the backend, either a real error or something validation related. So I have here just simple example that a discount can't be larger than 90%. And if that happens, just you can trigger a error from the backend. Let's go in there, discount 95%, and then we get a company policy maximum discount is 90%. So that's also really simple. You can change your error codes here as well, and a different message. And here's some error types you can use, and some other samples from not implemented. Maybe some SHGW users still know that you have to implement everything yourself. That can happen quite frequently. All right, then another thing really important is, why do we do that? Not just to manually test, but we want to automate the tests. And for that, that's perfect because we have a specific state and we can replicate that state every time. So we don't have any backend and we don't rely on specific process data. We have to ask, okay, can you please generate new test data for me? You can just get the data and replicate that process and integrate that in automated tests to recheck if that fix is still working. So I have some descriptions here how to add VDF5 to your applications. So the VDF5 team provided here just npm init latest, which almost added everything. For me, it didn't actually edit the UI5 service. So if it's missing, you can add that as well. And then we can just run start mock and run VDF5 for the test. So I added a really, really simple test just to check if the correct data is there. So I get the table from the list report and check if it's two entities here and check if the title also fits what is in the JSON data. So now start the app. So you have to start the app first before you run the VDI5 test. So we already know that it's our mock sample. And now we go here into test and we have a new folder end to end, and that's a configuration part. So usually you don't need to change anything here. I just needed to change the port to the right application because for every exercise here, I use a different port. So theory, you could run them all at the same time. And then here's our test I just shown. So really check if the control is here and see if that works. All right, let's run the test. This will open a new window. I hope I can show it. I think it's gonna open on my other screen. Yeah, come here. Oh no. Too slow? No, here it is. Damn it. Okay. Oh, there's an error. Cool. It was working before. All right, then just say, try it again. Just to see the window and maybe what's happening. There we go. So something is wrong. I don't know what. It worked this morning, but basically it will open a new browser window and then check if data is there and it works. So because we use the mock service, everything should always be the same. And that also works in any pipeline. So I already created many pipelines with some sample data, and then it will test with the same data every time if something works or not. And with the tenant information, I can use different data for different processes. I can test with VDI5. And just a little promotion, VDI5 was just released 2 days ago for 3.0, including VDI5 version 9. So there's some quite new performance improvements in there. So if you used it before, you're welcome to try again. I think there's even DevToberfest session. Last week or so?
I think it's already done. There are 2 small questions I see. So FE means pure elements. Yes, that's the...
Oh, yeah.
Well, yeah, pure elements. If you don't know it, look it up. It's great. I'm not totally sold on it. Dominic, an interesting question on this one. So you mentioned end-to-end testing. which, yes, technically, if you go strictly for the term, implies that you are testing your entire process end-to-end, from the front end to your real backend, including authentication and all of this. Yes, that's true. So in this case, this is more integration testing using WDI5. That's a question that everyone should ask themselves, whether they want to run their end-to-end test against their real backend with authentication, with all the problems that this might have, or whether they want to also just have integration tests, which already validates all their, let's say, backend logic to some extent, all the front-end reaction to the backend logic in a reproducible way without having too many problems there. But yes, technically speaking, this is integration testing.
But we're coming very, very close with that. Yeah. Perfect. So one last exercise I have is every time when I try to replicate a process, I usually had to recreate a process in the live app, then copy the request or response data from the backend and move it into JSON files in my data folders. So for that, I created a middleware that helps me in that. So I called it the UI5 Middleware OData recorder. So what you do is you start the process with an app. It will capture all the OData requests and save them as a JSON file in your folders. So for that, I have a special YAML file. So that's just a custom middleware used in your YAML file. And then you have to define for what's the name. So basically the folder name for that. What's the path for the OData service and where do you want to save all the data? And replay mode is basically using the Mockserver we just use here all the time. So I have here the exercise 9, and we already have here the local service with all the books. But for that case, we don't have it. So I just simulate we don't have anything here. And now we can start the recording. And I have a special flag here in the HTML record is 1. So in that case, it immediately records the session. So for example, if you want to just click 2 buttons and save that, you can request that to record later. But in my case, I want to start right at the beginning. So let's start that. So we have, I think I have debug turned on. So there's a lot of information in there. 2 minutes information, okay. And now I already started it. And let's just go to all of them just to make sure all the chapter data I have here is in here as well. And now when I go here, local service is already created, main service is created, metadata is always here as well. So every time when you open or record, the metadata is updated as well. And all the data here is also added. So for example, I think that one is new because I added new data in the cup service. That's why it's a little bit green here. And here are just one chapter. Okay, it's just one chapter. And now we could just start that in mock mode. So it's basically should look just the same. And here you go. So it's really simple that way to just get the data and just save it instead of going through the network requests in the console and get the data from there. It's just, it started out as a POC, but now it actually works. Obviously, OData is complicated. I think Nicolas knows that because he created a Mockserver. He knows it's really complicated. So you have a lot of custom OData requests, for example, expand. So I didn't implement that here if you have like expand in there, but at least it gives me like, I don't know, 60, 70% reduced time for what I had to usually do. And obviously, yeah.
Yeah, it's a very nice starting point actually, because it already gives you a set of data that you can play with and then that you can try and enhance or use as a basis for enhancement. So it's a very nice tool.
Yeah. It just started out. So is it even possible? And it is possible thanks to like the UI5 tooling ecosystem where it can just intercept those requests. For example, if you have here, when you look at the network request from batch, and then, so here's the typical, okay, get me all the books, but it also usually, especially in the fewer element state, it just selects data which is viewable here. So we have a select parameter here, but if you want to get the complete data, that's not that good. So in the middleware, I just removed the select parameter. And that's why when you look at the record YAML here, it's going before the fewer tools proxy. So for example, if you use the, I don't know what's called, the community proxy, simple proxy, I think, you have to also say here before middleware simple tool proxy, because I get the request and remove the select, and then that request is going to the backend without the select. So I can get the complete data in here. So I have some controlling here, configuration, for example, write data when you don't want to have the metadata always saved, or OData save is stream. So every time you get something automatically saved, maybe you want to record everything first and then on stop, basically save something. So I think it's a cool tool. Maybe I can use it in some productive environments and improve it. Let's see. All right, going back. So those were all the recordings, exercises. Again, you can just go to the tutorial. Did you share it, Nico?
Yeah, it was shared in the
It was shared? Yeah,
chat
perfect.
earlier. Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
I can reshare it actually. This way,
Yeah,
everything
because
is
oh yeah, that
clear.
was just a question exercise in GitHub. Yeah, it is on GitHub. Here is
I think.
the link to the GitHub pages. So it's all here in the README, but it's also here a little bit nicer looking at the GitHub pages where you can just go through the steps and do it for yourself. You can also go to the repo for the Mockserver. So here you have docs here as well with a little bit more information if you want to look in the pipeline APIs, for example, entity container API, or how to define mock data. A little bit more information, or you want to have some samples here as well. So for example, I don't know, do you want to talk about that now, Nicolas, or
Yeah, well,
TypeScript?
maybe I will take over the share and talk
Yeah.
about TypeScript a bit. So that's a tiny thing that really wasn't there when we started this presentation, or at least most likely as a let's say conceptual thing that we wanted to enable also TypeScript.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago, so it's pretty new.
Yes, more or less. And so the Mockserver will basically start anything TypeScript as long as it finds TS node available in your packages, and then it will try to load any file which is a well, books.ts, for instance, would be then the file that it tries to load by default if it's there compared to the other one. To go along with this, there is also a small tool within the a package called the FE Mockserver admin, which is still a bit in early stages, but the tools already give you based on the metadata and where you can get it. And maybe I should increase the size there a bit so that everyone can see what I'm showing. There you go. Why did it revert? So. Okay, so there is a small tool which come in the Mockserver admin, which allow you to generate the so TypeScript files for each of the objects that all the entity types that you have there. And by default, it mostly contains the data type, which you could generate already through some open source thing, and maybe we'll align on that. But it also includes the action data. So what are the parameters that you might expect from the action? And it will generate two functions. So the first one is the execute action function with the different switch case. So all the action that you might have on your entity will be added there with a nice to-do for you to do something about it. And I don't know if you have some in your sample, probably not. But it also adds a method to define the referential constraint. So by default, the Mockserver relies on referential constraints in order to be able to know if there are any how to link two objects together. And if the referential constraints are not defined, you might have surprises into what is being brought back, if anything. But there is also a chance that you get everything back, and you can define in the mock data something that will bring you the what is missing there. And well, the interesting thing is that this is TypeScript, it's fully typed, and then you can see, like I just did, you can check that you actually pass the necessary parameters to the functions. So for instance, fetch entries takes 2 arguments because you need to pass the OData request to know which tenant you're currently working on. So this usually is a nice thing to be able to know what you should have there and what you should pass. So there are a few quirks, like as often when you try to bring in partial objects, the base is not there, but it's there. So there are a few things that I need to see how to best address them, but you can have TypeScript nowadays relatively easily, and you can have a generation of your mock entities, which will provide some extra value. I don't know, maybe we can talk with Marian, and maybe this recorder we could add into this admin as well and see about extending it to spread along the object in a way.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I see now the error fetch entries. I do that wrong in my example, so we need to update as well.
Yes, I didn't check all the samples, but yeah, especially, I mean, this is usually because the request is the only place where you get the tenant as part of it. So if you want to update the right object in the end and not the default one, this is what you would do.
Okay, so without the OData request, always the default one is just updated?
I think so. I think it doesn't try to figure out which, if I remember correctly, that's how it works.
There's a question by the question by Dominic. I had the same question, Dominic. So the types, any chance to get a types generator as a central place?
Yeah, that's a good point. It would make sense to have the types generated in central place. I have to see, because we talked about this with Marian, and he mentioned also the OData to TS. So I have to see if the output is also somehow interesting, even though I like somehow the simplicity that I can get through this. But it would make sense to have the type centrally available, and so that you can easily update them in case you have already written something. What I won't do is go into the TypeScript code and only change the parts which haven't been touched. But yeah, for the types, that definitely makes sense to have them in the right place.
Yeah.
It also helps you realize that sometimes you created too many mock data, like you had those generate inventory report and bulk update price, which actually are not in the they're not in the mock data. They're not defined in the metadata. It's not in the sample that I checked. So yeah, typing is good.
Typing is good. All
Okay.
Right. I don't see any more questions. Do you have anything else to add, Nicolas?
I had just one slide with the links, but that is anyway something we already shared in the chat, to the repo, to the sample from this session. There is also an official tutorial for the Mockserver alongside OPA test that I will put in there. But apart from that, yeah, that's it.
All right. Thank you very much, guys. Thanks for the session. Great content. A lot of positive words in the chat, so that's always good. Everybody, please also check out the other Devtoberfest sessions today and the upcoming weeks. Check out our YouTube channel here and the community, the ACB community Devtoberfest group and events as well. Right. Thanks, Marian. Thanks, Nicolas. And hope to talk to everybody soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. We're